morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So the theme for this month that I read was being a force for good in a world that works for everyone. And I've been thinking about this theme for a while, and I thought a few weeks ago that, I have a good title for my message for this month. And I told Randy Brown, I think I got a title already, like a couple weeks ago. And he said, what is it? And I said, it's May the Force Be You. He said, yeah, that's really good. Don't mention it to anybody else so that nobody else takes it. And so that Thursday, I look in the newsletter to see what Randy Granger's topic is, and it's May the Force Be You. Because there is only one mind after all. So I'm going to get this. I forgot to do it ahead of time. In case. So I'm going to end up going with another title after all. And it's one that's actually inspired by something my mother used to say. Whenever I would procrastinate, not do my homework when I said I would, or not make the bed or whatever, she would have this expression that she used. She'd say, what are you waiting for, Mashiach to come? Mashiach being the word from which we get the word Messiah. What are you waiting for, the Messiah to come before you do your homework? Before you make your bed, you're going to be waiting possibly a very long time before those things get done. So the title of this message is, what are you waiting for? Now the concept of the Messiah is a lot of variation, a lot of variables within Judaism, so much so that there's a book out there that's titled, There Is No Messiah, and You're It. There is no Messiah, and you're it. Very reminiscent of, to some extent, of Ernest Holmes saying, God can only do for you what he'll do through you. Ernest Holmes, of course, the founder of religious science. And it's very reminiscent to me of John Kennedy's inauguration speech. The very last part of that was, here on earth, God's work must truly be our own. So, there is no Messiah, and you're it. Now, I was looking at the wording of the theme, being a force for good in a world that works for everyone, and I thought, as that stated, that sounds really easy. In a world that works for everyone, yeah, you can be a force for good. So I think the intention is being a force for good in creating or building or bringing about a world that works for everyone. And that's a bit more work, I think. So I was looking over the messages from the last couple of weeks, as I always do. And Reverend Bonnie started off her message speaking quite a bit about the concept of oneness, which Martha touched on as well in her invocation. And I thought, that's kind of appropriate because Ernest Holmes says somewhere that this concept of oneness is the foundation of everything in the science of mind. And so it's good to be reminded of it from time to time. In fact, I was thinking about oneness not just in relation to my talk, but in relation to a topic that is more or less on everybody's mind a lot of the time nowadays, but that we don't address up here. Occasionally someone will make a brief reference to it and then, just skirt the subject and then go back, but I figure maybe I will address the elephant and the donkey in the room. Back in March, lifetimes ago, so it seems, Reverend Bonnie said that she wasn't going to tell anybody how to vote. And then when it was my turn up here in March, I said, I will. And I said, when you go to vote, vote for someone and against no one. I imagine there's a fly in the room where people are signaling to me something. Okay, there's a fly. Vote for someone and against no one. Variation, of course, on Ernest Holmes, to be for something and against nothing. Now that's kind of difficult. I've been looking at, I don't watch the news, but some of it filters through to me anyway, and as far as I can tell, and from some people's Facebook posts, they're more or less planning to vote against someone rather than for someone. It's just the way things have shaped up. But it's also the consciousness that has been pervading our elections and our politics for quite some time. Consciousness of division, purposely setting things up as conflicts and battles. And that's not us. That's not what we do. We do oneness. We remember all is one. Remember we are one. So, especially during this election time, we have to step up our game here. I'll give the visitors a little bit of a pass on this, but anybody who's been here for a while, we have to step up our game. We have to remember that we're not about conflict. We're not about us versus them. And so I have to remind myself too. In my practice for the last few weeks has been in my meditation to remind myself very explicitly, not in some abstract form of, oh, all is one, but that Hillary Clinton and I are one. Donald Trump and I are one. And I invite everybody here to make that your practice for the next few weeks until the election. And I know it's not easy. I really don't want to do that. But I know that, so what if it's not easy? Nobody ever said it was going to be easy. Nobody ever said it to me anyway. I don't know if anybody said it to anybody else. Did anybody say that to you, Cheryl, Barbara, anybody, practitioners and people who have been studying for a while? Anybody ever tell you, hey, it's going to be easy? No. But it still has to be done regardless. We have to remind ourselves of the oneness. Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump are one. If we can just get that into our bones, then maybe when we go to vote, we can vote for someone and against no one. Now, why did I bring this up when no one else has? Is it because I think I'll step up and do it? No. It's because that consciousness of conflict that's been building and building does not fit with a world that works for everyone. You can't have a world that works for everyone and be against someone. It has to work for everyone. And that's the consciousness that we are trying to build here. A consciousness of oneness, a consciousness to build a world that works for everyone. Not just for Hillary and Donald, but for Hillary's supporters and Donald's supporters. How can you be at one with everyone and be against or in conflict with, let's say, a third of the population? So we have to start here. We have to start to build that consciousness of oneness here, against the tide, against that race consciousness that's out there that says, no, we should be in conflict, and we should be in harmony. So let's start building that ourselves. So make that your practice, just at least for the next 3 weeks, at least until the election. So as I say, when you go into vote, you'll vote for whoever you're voting for, and not against the other ones. So, with that said, I would like to have a world that works for everyone. Anybody here who doesn't want to have a world that works for everyone? Okay, I'll assume silence means consent. Yeah, I want to have that partly, because I think I'm a nice guy. And, I'd like for everybody to have what they need, to have a world that works for everyone, to have food and shelter and whatever they need. But also selfishly, I figure a world that works for everyone will work better for me. A world that works for everyone will work better for each of us as well. We can want that for very selfish reasons. So as we contemplate what we think a world that works for everyone would be, we can remember that. Yeah, it'll work better for me too. Now, as I was looking at the theme, I go to my soupy sales question. What do we mean by that? And so I was looking at definitions of the word force. And the definitions, you can occasionally see a few that are different, but most of them were along these lines. The use of physical power or violence to compel or restrain, to impose something forcibly upon a person. Violence, compulsion, or constraint exerted upon a person or a thing. To compel by force, to force one's opinions, and so on and so on. These were all the main definitions of the word force. There were some others that might have been more in line with what I suspect Reverend Bonnie meant by a force for good in a world that works for everyone. But those were mostly what the English words looked like. And so I started to wonder, well, if the phrase a force for good were in the Hebrew Bible or in the Greek New Testament, what would those be about? What would those look like? So I went to my good friend, Mr. Google, and I asked him, how would you translate a force for good into Greek? And he came back with this. Dunami gai to kalo. Now, kalo is a Greek word that we can translate as good. There are several Greek words that translate as good. They said the Greeks didn't have a word for it. They had a whole bunch of words for anything. But the word dunami is the word from which we get dynamo. And I liked that, being a dynamo for good. Being a dynamo for good. Having that thing that generates the energy. Well, Kathy and I went to a seminar a few weeks ago, and the seminar leader, Brendan Burchard, kept reminding us that the power plant doesn't have energy, it generates energy. And it does that with that dynamo. So I went back to my friend Mr. Google, and I asked him, all right, how would you say a force for good in the Hebrew language? And he came back with koach tamid. And that seemed a little odd to me, more than a little odd, actually. The word koach, it means strength. To me, it means sort of the internal strength that gets you through a long, hard day of work. You have the koach to get through it. So not quite what I was looking for, but tamid was really strange, because tamid means always, or continually, or going on. And I thought, well, how did he get that? And of course, there's no he there. There's no actual Mr. Google. There's a bunch of translation programs. And I realized it was translating the phrase for good, which can mean, from now on, like I'm giving up sugar for good. And so that's how that program ended up translating that. And I thought about that, and I thought that's an interesting twist on the theme. Being a force that brings about a world that works for everyone, for good. So another little twist, another little way to think about that. But I actually wanted to think about how you would say a force for good in the Hebrew language, and so I went and I asked Rabbi Carroll. And first he came up with maybe koach, and then he said, no, not really, for more or less the reasons I've said. And then he ended up saying ruach hatov, hatov meaning the good. Ruach is the word that we translate as spirit or wind. They're the same thing in most ancient languages. A ruach, a spirit for good. A wind, something that has an impetus, something that propels outward. So I like that, or a wind or spirit for good. And I even tied them all together. The wind that turns the turbine, that gets the dynamo to generate the energy to bring about a world that works for everyone. I fit it all together. I thought it was really nice that way. So then I thought, well, let's find out what Ernest Holmes might have to say about these sorts of things. Ernest Holmes, the founder of religious science, and so generally when we do a message up here, we delve into Ernest's words. And Ernest Holmes, the books that he wrote, the books that he actually sat down and wrote, mostly he would address how to use the science of mind for an individual, either for oneself or for another individual. But in the books that are compendiums, collections of his lectures or his talks, he will sometimes address science of mind in a wider venue. How do you use it for the world? And so I have some examples here. In the philosophy of Ernest Holmes, he says, if we listen, if we stay still long enough, if we accept enough, something will happen to us. That which the good, the great, and the wise proclaimed, and all religious systems have been built on, will no longer be heralded by the saviors. You will be that savior. You will become that Christ. You will be that Buddha. You will be that Atman. This is our mission to the world. The world is waiting. What are you waiting for? The Messiah to come? No. You are that Messiah. There is no Messiah, and you are it. We are the ones that we have been waiting for. Going back to some memories of my mom, she had a great love for books and for movies, which she passed on to both me and my sister. And some of the movies that I've seen, the first time I saw them was not on the screen, but through her descriptions and her recounting of the movie and of the books. And one of the books that she told us, one of the stories that she told us, was the story of the Great Stone Face. I don't know how many of you have read The Great Stone Face, Nathaniel Hawthorne. Well, you should. It's actually good. And I'll briefly summarize it here. There's this valley where a large number of people live. It's a large valley, and it's ringed by mountains. And one of the mountains, if you look at it from just the right angle, looks like a human face. And not just any human face, but a face that's full of wisdom and compassion and understanding, a divine face, really. And the story starts out with this mother telling her little boy, whose name is Ernest, by the way, in the story, her little boy, that there's this prophecy that one day someone will be born in that valley who will have the same face as the Great Stone Face. And he says, oh, mother, I hope I can live to see that. I hope I can see that man who will be like the Great Stone Face. And Ernest spends a lot of his time when he's done with his chores or when he's grown, going with his work, just contemplating that Great Stone Face, the compassion of it, the wisdom, the kindness, the majesty, the divinity of it. And from time to time through his life, there will be someone who has gone out, who is born in the valley and then gone out into the world and done some great things, and then he returns to the valley. And as he returns, there's a rumor going around, oh, he's the one that's going to look just like the Great Stone Face. And when he does return, a lot of the people say, yes, look, he looks just like the Great Stone Face. But Ernest, who has spent more of his time contemplating that face than anyone else, says, no, that's not him. And he's disappointed by it. Now, I don't think I'm giving any spoilers away if I say that at the end it does turn out that indeed it is Ernest who has the likeness of that Great Stone Face. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. Let's remember that. In, Ideas of Power by Ernest Holmes, he says this. He says, the very essence of religious science is that we are destined to heal the world. You and I are the vanguard of the greatest spiritual movement the world has ever known. I want you to let that sink in, not just the people he was talking to when he was giving this lecture. You and I are the vanguard of the greatest spiritual movement the world has ever known. And out of your heart and mine, and your mind and mine, trained to think and to work, shall come the force, and the propulsion and the impulsion that may heal the world. In the philosophy of Ernest Holmes, he says this: we have launched something very similar. We have launched a movement that is destined to be the great new religious impulsion of our day and of modern times. Something new and grand will have appeared. We are the forerunners of a new race of people. We are the arbiters of the fate of unborn generations. We are. You and I. We are. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. Ernest Holmes is clearly charging us with a mission. I like that, charging us. Charging us with a mission. What are we going to do about it? In How to Change Your Life, Ernest Holmes says something that I wish a lot more New Thought authors would emphasize and remind us of. He's been describing how to build a mental equivalent of the good that you want and of treating for it and of, as he says, planting it in the realm of cause. And then he says, so the good you have chosen and planted in the realm of cause requires definite action on your part. And it needs to be right action, too. God does for us, as he says so many times, what he does through us. Think about what he's saying there. Action, not just to sit back and meditate about this vision that you have, but to act in the world. He goes on to say, everything you can do objectively, that is in the physical world, to promote this chosen good is, of course, what you are going to be doing. Think about that, of course. He just assumes, yeah, once you've got this vision, once you've planted that mental seed, you are now going to be doing everything that you can to bring it about. He says anything less would be childish and infantile. I think this is why a lot of people out there reject the popular notion of what's called the law of attraction and of the secret, because a lot of people have been teaching it as though, well, all you have to do is, make this mental picture, make a collage somewhere and study it all the time, and then everything will just come to you. Everything that you want will come to you. All you have to do is really, 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 really want it. And I've said, if that were true, there'd be a lot more kids with ponies out there. Not to mention a lot more people with food. It's just not the case. But that's what a lot of people think the teaching of the law of attraction is, not Ernest Holmes. He says that such a notion is infantile and childish. He says, you don't expect to get anything without paying the price for it. That price in the objective world usually consists of good work, systematic study, personal development, and any concrete action that is your part in this. I remember a bit after The Secret came out, R.J. Crabb was up here, Reverend R.J., saying, you can't just, sit and ohm things into being. When he was going for his doctorate, yes, he would meditate, but then he would go out and do the research and do the writing and do the work to get that doctorate done. It wasn't just a matter of making your mental equivalent of what it is, it's then bringing it about. That's really a secret that people haven't told, that the point of the law of attraction is to attract you to that good so that you will go out and do what is necessary to bring it about. So again, what are you going to do about it? Reverend Bonnie said that in the past, she's asked people, how has Spirit made a difference through you? And that a couple of weeks ago, she changed that to, how is Spirit making a difference through you? So I'll complete the sequence, and I will ask you, how will Spirit make a difference through you? Now, today, this week, this month, no, next month, for good. How will Spirit make a difference through you? What are the actual steps? What is the process? What are you actually going to do? And I say, Ernest Holmes charges us with a mission. He says in Ideas of Power, you are the person. Here is the place. Today is the time. This is the moment. He goes on, he says, the next thing I would like very much to make plain, very much, do not, please, wait till you know more, get more spiritual, get a bigger understanding. He emphasizes, please do not wait. The garden that isn't planted won't grow. The seed that is not sown will not flourish. And again, he's not talking here about planting a seed in the law or in mind. At this point, he's saying, planting a physical seed, the actual doing of things. So I would enjoin everybody right now to start making a plan. Make a plan right now. What are the concrete steps? What is your part in bringing about a world that works for everyone? How are you going to be that force, that dynamo for good? To make a plan. A plan is an intention with a schedule, with a set of steps and a set of dates. And I would like us all to follow Mary Lynn's example here. She had this notion, and Randy, that they had this notion about a choir for youth, and they didn't sit and meditate about it for hours and hours and years. They went out and started doing the things that need to get done. They started finding out what resources are necessary and gathering them. They started doing the work, the concrete actions, as Ernest Holmes says. I would like us all to follow that example. So what are the concrete actions that each of us will be doing, as Ernest Holmes says, of course, will be doing to make our part happen, because we each have a part in it. We each have things to do. This is not some sewing circle where we just gather together. Playtime is over, boys and girls. It's time to start doing the work. And if anybody doubts it, I am definitely talking to the man with the microphone as much as anybody else at this moment. Because playtime has got to be over for me. My projects have to get done. I have a project that I call Forgiving in the Real World, because I've seen a lot of the teachings about forgiving lately that I see big holes in it, I see errors, I see things that have to be cleared up. And so I've been working on that, or rather I've been thinking about that for far too long. So I have a plan, and I have a schedule that I'm starting to put into place. My schedule is when I go home this afternoon, I'm going to continue with some research that I've scheduled out that I know, because I have some holes in the workshop and possibly book for that Forgiving in the Real World. But I also have to know that I have to work with some people to test out some of the things that are going into the workshop before I bring it out into the world. And so I'm going to be going out into the fellowship hall and seeing who wants to join with me, to work with me on this project, to test out some of the things that need to be tested out. So something that you can do is not just come up with your own project, but work with other people's projects. Work with Mary Lynn's and Randy's. Work on my project. Find some other things that people are doing until you come up with your own. And then people will help you with your project. That's the way we do things. To bring those projects into reality, to get a little bit closer to a world that works for everyone, to have a world that works a little bit better for a few more people. That's how we start. As Ernest Holmes says, please do not wait. As my mother said, what are you waiting for, the Messiah to come? There is no Messiah, and you're it. Tag, you're it. So whatever you think you've been waiting for, it is waiting for you. And so it is.